Did you know that some people find it easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism? See, it's a thought provoking statement that reflects just how deeply embedded capitalism is in our collective consciousness. But why is it so hard to envision a life beyond this economic system? Of course, the pervasive belief that capitalism is the only viable political and economic system, and that it's impossible to imagine a coherent alternative, is not just a product of abstract theory, it's reinforced daily through our experiences, media, and even our leaders' words. Consider this. For over 3 decades, capitalism has dominated public consciousness. Former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher famously declared, "There is no alternative," while political scientist Francis Fukuyama argued that we have reached the end of history with the triumph of liberal democracy and free market capitalism. These statements encapsulate the widespread notion that capitalism is not just the best option, but the only one. But is it really? Well, let's begin our journey by understanding how we got here and why the alternatives to capitalism seem so hard to find. How did capitalism become the dominant ecosystem, and how has it been reinforced over time? Traveling down memory lane, you'll agree that capitalism didn't always dominate the world. Its roots can be traced back to the early modern period, particularly during the 18th and 19th centuries' Industrial Revolution. This era saw the transition from agrarian economies to industrialized ones, driven by technological innovations and the rise of factory-based production. These changes created unprecedented economic growth and transformed societies, laying down the groundwork for modern capitalism. After World War II, capitalism entered a new phase of expansion. The United States emerged as a global superpower, promoting free market principles and liberal democracy worldwide. This period, often referred to as the Golden Age of capitalism, saw significant economic growth, rising living standards, and the creation of the welfare state in many Western countries. However, this era also strengthened the idea that capitalism was synonymous with progress and prosperity. By the late 20th century, neoliberalism, a political and economic philosophy advocating for free markets, deregulation, and reducing government spending, started rising. Leaders like Margaret Thatcher in the UK and Ronald Reagan in the US championed these ideas, significantly reshaping economic policies. This belief has been further reinforced by cultural and political narratives. During the Cold War, for example, capitalism was framed as a superior system in the ideological battle against communism. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 seemed to confirm this view, leading many to believe that no viable alternatives existed. The media and education systems have also played crucial roles in embedding capitalist realism. Popular culture often celebrates entrepreneurial success and consumerism, while educational curricula emphasize the benefits of market economies. These influences shape our perceptions from a young age, making it challenging to envision alternative systems. But really, this isn't a history class, so let's save the background story and focus on why it's so hard to imagine life after capitalism. To do this, we must first understand the concept of capitalist realism. Coined by the cultural theorist Mark Fisher, capitalist realism is the pervasive sense that capitalism is the only viable economic and political system, and that it's impossible to even imagine a coherent alternative. Capitalist realism is more than just an ideology. It's a framework that shapes how we perceive the world. It operates on multiple levels, embedding itself in our culture, politics, and personal beliefs. Fisher describes it as the widespread acceptance that capitalism is the only realistic political economic system, making any alternative seem unrealistic or utopian. Interestingly, cultural and political narratives play a significant role in reinforcing capitalist realism. From Hollywood movies that celebrate wealth and individual success, to news media that highlight the failures of socialist experiments, our cultural landscape is saturated with messages that uphold capitalism as the default mode of human organization. At the same time, politically, leaders often promote the idea that there is no alternative to capitalism. For instance, during crises, politicians and pundits frequently frame market-based solutions as the only feasible options, reinforcing the notion that capitalism is synonymous with pragmatism and common sense. And somehow, all of these directly affect our psychology, creating a sense of inevitability and making it hard for people to conceive of different ways of organizing society. This mindset can lead to a sense of hopelessness and resignation, where individuals feel powerless to effect meaningful change. Moreover, capitalist realism promotes the belief that human nature is inherently competitive and selfish, aligning perfectly with capitalist principles. This belief is often used to justify the persistence of capitalism, suggesting that any other system would be incompatible with our natural tendencies. Economically, capitalist realism is sustainable by the viable success of capitalism, particularly technological innovation and economic growth. These successes are often highlighted, while the system's failures, like inequality and environmental degradation, are downplayed or framed as necessary evils. The idea that capitalism is self-correcting and capable of endless adaptation further cements its position. We now see crisis beyond indicators of systemic failure, but as opportunities for the market to correct itself and return stronger. Now, to fully understand why it's so challenging to imagine a world beyond capitalism, we need to critically analyze the system itself, its impacts, contradictions, and the way it shapes our lives. Let's begin with the economic inequality, which is undoubtedly one of the most glaring issues with capitalism. Despite unprecedented wealth generation, the gap between the rich and the poor continues to widen. The wealthiest individuals and corporations amass vast fortunes, while large segments of the population struggle with poverty and lack of access to basic needs. Trust me, this inequality is not an accident, but a feature of the capitalist system, prioritizing profit over equitable resource distribution. I mean, we all see this happen time and time again, don't we? As capital accumulates in fewer hands, social mobility diminishes and economic power becomes concentrated, leading to a cycle of wealth and power perpetuation among the 1% of the 1% who are fighting tooth and nail to ensure things remain that way. But beyond economic inequality, our environment is also taking a fall. Capitalists' relentless pursuit of growth encourages the exploitation of natural resources at an unsustainable rate, contributing to climate change, deforestation, pollution, and biodiversity loss. The drive for continuous economic expansion often comes at the expense of environmental health, putting the planet and future generations at risk. The capitalist model's short-term focus on profits undermines long-term sustainability, making implementing meaningful environmental reforms within this framework very difficult. As a result, we face ecological crises that threaten the very foundations of life on Earth. And this extends to our social structures and psychological well-being. The constant pressure to consume and compete fosters a culture of individualism and materialism, eroding community bonds and social cohesion. People are often valued more for their economic contributions and purchasing power than for their intrinsic human qualities. Psychologically, the system promotes a sense of inadequacy and perpetual dissatisfaction. And this is the primary reason we have fully bred an always consuming society. I talk a little bit more about this in my previous video. You can check the description box for the link to the video. So back to it. Advertising and media continually push the message that happiness and success are tied to material possessions, leading to what we can call the hedonic treadmill, where people constantly seek more without ever feeling truly fulfilled. Now, have you been wondering why anxiety, depression, and other mental health issues are becoming increasingly popular? Well, I guess you now have your answer. Anyway, let's look beyond the surface for a minute for an even more precise perspective. Many people don't admit to this, but you will agree that capitalism is often praised for promoting freedom and choice, when, in actual sense, this freedom is largely illusionary for many. The truth is, the economic constraints associated with capitalism limit real choices. especially for those in lower socioeconomic strata. I mean you and I, who occupy the middle class. The freedom to choose is often circumscribed by one's ability to pay, making genuine freedom and equality unattainable for all but a privileged few. Moreover, the concentration of corporate power can undermine democratic processes. Large corporations exert significant influence over politics and policymaking, often prioritizing their interests over the public good. This corporate dominance erodes the democratic ideal of government by the people, for the people. One of the major reasons capitalism seems so unshakable is due to the myths that surround and support it. And checking through, there's really a lot of them. First, we have the one that says capitalism is aligned with human nature. This statement stems from the fact that humans are inherently competitive and selfish. This view suggests that humans are naturally driven by greed and the pursuit of personal gain, making capitalism the only viable economic system. But boy, how false can they be? Yes, competition and self-interests are aspects of human behavior. However, undoubtedly, they are not the whole story. Humans are also inherently cooperative, altruistic, and capable of profound acts of kindness and mutual aid. Anthropological and sociological studies show that cooperation and community support are fundamental to human societies. Historical and contemporary examples of communal living and cooperative enterprises demonstrate that other economic societies can thrive by emphasizing these traits. As I've also mentioned in the video earlier, many argue that capitalism is the most efficient system, and there really are no other alternatives. You see, while capitalism has led to significant technological advancements and economic growth, it's also marked by inefficiencies, waste, overproduction, planned obsolescence, environmental degradation, extreme focus on short-term gains, poor long-term planning, and so on. The list is literally endless. At the same time, while some experiments with alternative systems have failed or encountered significant challenges, others have shown promise and success. For instance, various forms of social democracy, cooperatives, and community-based economies have demonstrated the potential for equitable and sustainable development. Additionally, the failures of alternatives often result from external pressures such as economic sanctions, military interventions, and other forms of interference, rather than inherent flaws in the systems themselves. Exploring and experimenting with new models remains essential for addressing the shortcomings of capitalism. See, by debunking these myths, we can open up the space to imagine and explore alternatives to capitalism. Recognizing the limitations and falsehoods that support capitalist realism is the first step towards envisioning a more equitable, sustainable, and fulfilling economic system. It is crucial to challenge these entrenched beliefs and expand our collective imagination to consider a world beyond capitalism. To be honest, understanding the depth and entrenchment of capitalist realism is only just the beginning. The next step is to actively seek ways to challenge this dominant narrative and open up possibilities for alternative systems that prioritize equity, sustainability, and human well-being. One of the most effective ways to combat capitalist realism is through education and awareness. By learning about alternative economic systems and understanding the flaws of capitalism, individuals can begin to question the status quo. This involves critically engaging with history, economics, and current events to see beyond the narrative that capitalism is the only viable option. Then, we need to support and participate in alternative economic models to help break the hold of capitalist realism. Cooperatives, social enterprises, and community-based economies offer tangible examples of how economies can be organized differently. By supporting these initiatives, we can contribute to building a more diverse and resilient economic landscape. Policy change is crucial in creating a framework that supports alternative economic systems. This involves advocating for policies that promote social and economic justice, environmental sustainability, and democratic control over economic resources. Supporting political movements and leaders committed to these goals can help shift the balance of power away from corporate interests and towards the public good. More importantly, we must adopt more sustainable and mindful consumption habits. This involves making conscious choices about what we buy, how we use resources, and how we engage with the environment. By prioritizing sustainability and reducing our reliance on consumer culture, we can create a lifestyle that aligns more closely with the values of equity and environmental stewardship. Listen, the belief that there is no life after capitalism is a powerful narrative, but it's not an unbreakable one. By promoting awareness, supporting alternative models, advocating for policy change, building community, encouraging creative thinking, and practicing sustainable living, we can begin to envision and create a future that transcends the limitations of capitalism. The journey towards a more equitable and sustainable world starts with questioning the inevitability of capitalism and daring to imagine what could be possible. Let's take the first steps together, challenging the myths that bind us and exploring the possibilities that lie beyond the horizon of capitalist realism. The future is not set in stone, trust me, and with collective effort, we can shape it in ways that prioritize human and environmental well-being over mere profit. So yeah, we've now come to the end. If you found this video thought-provoking, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content that challenges the status quo. More importantly, let's keep this conversation going in the comments. What do you think a world beyond capitalism could look like? Let me leave you with one last thought. The end of capitalism is not an end, but a beginning of exploring new ways to organize our economies and societies that prioritize well-being, sustainability, and equity. The future is now in our hands, and it starts with daring to imagine the impossible, and impossible such as this one.